one of the most important individuals who would be instrumental in maintaining the vast power of the Corleone family empire, yet still maintains an air of mystery, is the legendary Consigliere Tom Hagen. His story is actually quite tragic. There's a lot to cover and learn from Tom. He helped the empire grow to be worth billions and held all the secrets of the Corleone family. After all, he was the Don's right-hand man. Under the reign of both godfathers, the reliable and extremely underrated Consigliere is always in the background, always working behind the scenes making things happen. And to be honest, wouldn't you wish you had an advisor like Tom? Even though the films didn't focus primarily on him, Tom still was an integral part of the Corleone family and played a key role in its success. But as important as he was, we don't know much about Tom, and so after digging through all the canon, analyzing the films, the novels, and all the scripts, we managed to uncover some absolutely shocking facts about the legendary Consigliere. This filled in all the gaps and questions we were left to ponder all these years later, completely changing the way we saw Tom, but adding a lot more depth to the entire series. So this is the story of the iconic Consigliere, Tom Hagen.
What did Tom Hagen do for Vito Corleone?
The rise of Tom Hagen. Thomas Hagen was born in 1916 in New York City. Very little is known about Tom's parents, but we know that he was the son of a German-American named Martin Hagen and Bridget Hagen of Irish descent. To say he had a rough childhood is a massive understatement. By the time Tom was 12, he had already been through a lot. Tom's mother had died the year before from alcoholism, and only a few weeks earlier, his father had disappeared. The neighborhood gossiped and whispered, speculating about his father's whereabouts. Some believed he had descended into a bottomless pit of alcohol, a never-ending bender that had swallowed him whole. Yet as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the truth emerged with painful clarity. Tom's father was never to return. Tom and his sister were now on their own. With all that going on, the landlord kicked him out, throwing out all his family's belongings onto the street. He then spent weeks roaming the streets, sleeping in freight trains, and doing everything he could to survive, and developed a serious eye infection. But then, his life would change forever. One day, Tom was seated, sobbing on a three-legged chair, out on the street in front of what was his apartment. It so happened that Sonny was walking by that day with Michael and a few others. Although they barely knew each other, only ever having chatted here and there. But when Tom said, "I'm going blind, Sonny," his voice had this desperation, like they were lifelong friends, and Tom needed help, badly. This really moved Sonny. He felt like he needed to do something, and so after contemplating what to do, he decided to take him to his father. Santino then persuaded his father to take him into the family. Vito eventually agreed to bring Tom into the family, but would not formally adopt Tom or change his last name, out of respect to his parents. What's interesting is that I'm sure some of you would have noticed how Vito's adoption of Tom actually paralleled how he himself was taken in by the Abandando family when he arrived in New York. And well, the rest, I guess, is history. Growing up, to say Tom looked up to Sonny would be a massive understatement. After all, he was the one who had brought him into the family. Sonny looked out for Tom countless times, saving his life a lot more than you'd think. Even saving him from the wrath of one Luca Brasi. But that's a story for a different day. Becoming Consigliere. As Tom grew up, he would show a distinct intelligence that even surpassed the Corleone children. He was intelligent and proved to be a fast learner. Excluding Michael, he would go much further in his formal education than any of the other Corleone children. So Vito saw a lot of potential in young Tom, but he wouldn't officially join the organization till many years later. Don Corleone's first Consigliere was his closest childhood friend, Genco Abandando. Genco was exactly the type of man every Mafia Don would want in a Consigliere. He possessed all the famous characteristics of a true Sicilian Consigliere. He was both shrewd and cunning, sharp-witted, even being able to almost immediately read people, as well as an astute ability to both perceive potential threats and risks and set them out others. But wait, what is a Consigliere? If you're not familiar with exactly what a Consigliere is or why it's such an important role in the Mafia, here's what you need to know. In simple terms, a Consigliere plays the role of an advisor to the family and sometimes seen as the boss's right-hand man. They're used as a mediator of disputes, representatives in meetings with other families. In practice, the Consigliere is normally the third-ranking member within the administration structure of a family. It is traditionally always a senior member within the family, familiar with how the organization is run. They're also often the liaison between the Don and important figures such as politicians or judge, therefore acting as a buffer between the Don and his soldiers to insulate him from potential threats. Whether from the streets or from law enforcement, a boss will appoint someone close to them, someone who they can absolutely trust as their consigliere. And we'll get into what makes a good consigliere and what Sonny meant when he said this. But anyway, during his time, Tom went on to study at one of the most prestigious law schools, in which after graduating he was asked by Vito where he wanted to begin working, as Vito had connections to the most respected law firms in the country. But to his surprise, Tom wanted to work under Vito as though he were one of the Don's own sons. Tom did so knowing full well that Vito wasn't merely an olive oil importer, but the most powerful crime boss in the country. But this had no effect on his decision. This genuinely pleased Vito, as he knew that having an intelligent and shrewd lawyer was a key asset to have. But because of Tom's German-Irish ancestry, it prevented him from being a formal member in the Mafia, as they did not accept non-Italians. But even so, Tom wielded immense power within the Corleone family under Vito, as he was both Vito's right-hand man and his most trusted advisor in most matters. His cunning and diplomacy had always been a more valuable asset than Sonny's brash and reckless nature. He also provided Don Corleone insight into legal matters that some of his other men couldn't. In 1945, Genco, Vito's childhood friend and companion, became seriously ill, and Hagen was named acting Consigliere, which raised quite a few eyebrows, but since it seemed temporary, most people didn't give it much thought. But soon, it became clear that Genco was not going to make it, and so Don Vito did what seemed to be the impossible, officially appointing a non-Sicilian consigliere, making him the first non-Italian to achieve that critical position. This caused certain rival mafia families to refer jokingly to the Corleones behind their backs as the Irish Gang because of Hagen's Irish ancestry. War of the Five Families. After the attempt on Don Vito's life and the commencement of what will be known as the War of the Five Families would prove to be the biggest challenge Tom would ever face. The odds were against them, especially given their lack of experience. And to be fair, any consigliere in that position would have been overwhelmed with the magnitude of what they were facing, as Sonny surprisingly correctly pointed out. But this begs the question, was he a good consigliere? Now, this isn't as simple as it may seem, but here are some things to consider. I guess the best place to start is what makes a good wartime consigliere? Is it winning the war or avoiding it altogether? What could have done differently to be considered a good wartime consigliere? Some factors we have to consider include the fact that he was not Sicilian for starters, which is something that is often pointed out. But more specifically, he wasn't a Sicilian gangster, meaning he didn't grow up in that environment, let alone have any actual experience. Then we have to understand the simple fact that Tom was a lawyer, not a gangster. You know, more of a Saul Goodman than a Scarface. So when it came to the law and to bend it to the Don's will, no one was better, and that was the true value Tom provided. Sure, he could advise or give the Don his opinion on street matters, but again, looking at things through a business standpoint, a consigliere needs to be a lot more. He's also essentially the family's chief military strategist. When you look at Genco, a man who grew up with Vito in the same ruthless culture, he had a far better understanding of how things work because of his experience. Tom grew up for most of his life under the protection of a powerful man, so he really was not equipped or could really think as a mobster would. His rise was not through the rough streets of New York, rather he had established himself through the halls of Ivy League universities. But this is somewhat complex, so we'll need to get into that at a different time. Comment below what you think. Our upcoming video covering the art of war will give us a lot more reliable answers. Once he had slightly regathered his strength and learned the news about Sonny, it was time for him to fix the mess he found the family was in. He was brutally honest with himself on where his position was on the chessboard. The only thing he could do now was buy some time. He was willing to lose the battle in hopes of winning the war.
Or won't they take that as a sign of weakness?
It is a sign of weakness.
When he managed to safely get Michael back from Sicily, he and Tom would mentor Michael, bringing him into how the family really works. The Corleone family was in a very desperate position, in which they were losing territories and respect from the other Dons, who saw this as the eventual destruction of the Corleone era. But Vito and Michael were actually preparing for something that would completely shock the entire criminal world. And with Michael's new vision and drive to transform the family, they had begun working on this monumental mission. Michael was a fast learner, seemingly almost too fast. Soon, Michael was ready to take over the family and start making plays behind Tom's back, straining their relationship.
Maybe I could help. You're out, Tom.
And this brings us to one of the biggest questions of the film. Even as intelligent and shrewd as Tom was, he still did not possess or lack the strategic caliber of a true Sicilian Consigliere. Even though his approach might seem reasonable, as the family really was in serious trouble taking on all of the 5 families, especially at once. But what would have been the right approach? It's very difficult to say what exactly would have been the correct move to make and whose approach was correct, as Sonny and Tom were polar opposites. On one hand, you have Sonny as the acting boss. Although fairly capable and intelligent, he was far too reckless in matters of strategy, especially up against the highly experienced Dons, such as Don Barzini or really any of the other Dons, let alone all of them at the same time. But it's important to mention that Sonny, although not as experienced as the other Dons, was put in a similar situation in the past during the pacification of New York, and he really did successfully manage to cause some serious damage to his enemies and came out on top. However, Vito quickly recovered and patched things up, ending that war. But then you have Consigliere Tom Hagen, who was very intelligent, logical, and strategic when it came to peacetime negotiations and diplomacy. However, had no real direct experience on winning wars, which is why we see Tom trying to make deals, but at the same time, it did have its consequences. But what shattered Tom's overall confidence and seriously affected him personally was what ended up happening to Sonny. While he loved all the Corleones, Hagen idolized Sonny, and so when Sonny was murdered, Hagen blamed himself. It affected him so much that he had to have a drink first to calm his nerves before breaking the news to Vito, and it continued to haunt him ever since. One of Michael's most drastic and unpredictable moves was when he basically demoted Tom from Consigliere down to just a lawyer to oversee the family's legitimate business interests. This obviously offended Tom, and a move that wouldn't make sense until later on. But Tom fought back, and Michael simply told him that he wasn't good enough. He wasn't a wartime Consigliere, adding that it was no reflection of the work he had done for them in the past. And Vito agreed. But after Vito's passing, Michael reinstates Tom to his former position. However, Michael is still weary of Tom, and for some reason, Michael reduces Tom's involvement and is excluded from certain aspects within the family. Tom remained on with Michael during the move to Nevada, albeit in the somewhat reduced role that he disliked. He was excluded from the negotiations with Hyman Roth. He also apparently made moves towards becoming a Nevada congressman that never panned out. Reinstatement. After the attempt on Michael's life at the compound, Michael appointed Tom as acting Don. This came as quite a surprise to Tom, as it marked a deep trust in him. Consequently, Tom finally understood why Michael had been distancing him from certain aspects of the family business. Michael explained that this was why he had previously excluded Tom and now trusted only him. He knew that Tom lacked certain information and therefore had no motive or information to use against him. Hagen played an instrumental role in both securing the friendship of powerful Senator Patrick Geary and defending Michael as his lawyer during the Senate hearings on the Mafia. After Michael had dealt with all his enemies once again, there was still one last loose end that he needed Tom to handle. Michael instructed him to convince the almost traitor and former Capo regime Frank Pentangeli to, let's just say, remain permanently silent once and for all. This was to protect Michael and the family from his testimony forever. With Pentangeli and other enemies eliminated, the Corleone family regained its position as the most powerful crime family in the nation and was on its way to fulfilling Michael's longtime vision. Around 1959, Michael caught wind of an offer sent to Tom. It was a very lucrative offer to take up the position of vice president at the Houston hotels in Vegas. Even with Michael's cruel remarks and insinuations, he still stuck through and remained loyal to the family. And so this is the last we ever get to see Tom.
Don't worry about anything, Frankie.
Adios.
Thanks, Tom.
So now it's time to answer one of the biggest questions that really isn't addressed in the films. How exactly did Tom die? Now, I want you to remember the time when you watched The Godfather 3 for the first time. Can you still remember it? Can you recall that opening scene and noticing something quite troubling? I think the biggest disappointment was not having one of the trilogy's best characters around. He left a very big hole in that movie that simply couldn't be compensated by anyone else. Now let me be clear, this isn't a criticism aimed at anyone involved, but it's safe to say that not having Robert Duvall reprise his role was a monumentous mistake. Putting that aside for a moment, it's puzzling that apart from his fleeting mention of Tom, we never hear anything more about his fate. This raises an obvious question. Tom Hagen was one of the main and most important characters, so why do we not know what happened to him? Up to this point, every character had their fates so meticulously crafted. So what exactly transpired with Tom? But after some digging, here's what we do know. In the films, it really isn't addressed, but it seems it was from natural causes. However, the later novels offer an alternative set of events. In the novel The Godfather's Revenge, Tom Hagen was murdered by Nick Garacci in 1964, a former Capo regime, who had kidnapped and drowned Tom in Florida. However, Paramount Pictures have stated that it did not authorize The Godfather's Revenge, which means that his death in the novel is non-canon. But there is another version of what could have taken place. Dean Reisner's draft of The Godfather Part 3 offers a different set of events. Hagen was in his car along with his driver Fritz and Michael's son Anthony. They were escorted by various button men under Rocco, when suddenly a shotgunner gets out from a nearby car. The first hit takes out the driver, which then forces the car to go out of control. The second hit takes out Hagen instantly. The shotgunner then disappears, and when the car crashes nearby, Rocco and several button men jump out of their cars and rush to the crash site. Anthony was the only survivor of this ambush. But what actually seems to be the primary reason Tom was not in The Godfather 3 was the fact Robert Duvall had some disagreements behind the scenes. Therefore, he turned down the role and was written out of the script. Which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Either way, I want to personally thank Mr. Duvall for his incredible performance. He was a key pillar that made these films as great as they were, and I'm sure you all agree. Lessons from Tom. As usual, one of our core focuses in the Culture Mafia is extracting valuable lessons from across history and people. And without a doubt, analyzing Tom Hagen leaves us with a treasure trove of lessons we can learn from. Tom Hagen is a character who exemplifies unwavering loyalty, emotional control, and the power of silence. His pragmatic approach to navigating the treacherous terrain of organized crime provides insights into effective decision-making and adaptability. We might need a full video breaking down all the key lessons as well as his subtle body language cues that he utilizes. If you're interested in that, comment below, but here are some of the most important ones I want you to think about. Number 1. Emotional control. Like Don Vito and Michael, Tom was a master at maintaining emotional control, even in the most intense situations. This illustrates the power of composure. It reminds us that reacting impulsively out of anger or frustration can often lead to poor decisions and strained relationships. Just ask Sonny. By staying calm and collected, one can think more clearly and navigate challenges effectively. Number 2. Less talk, more action. Hagen's inclination to speak only when necessary demonstrates how important it is to communicate thoughtfully. Often talking too much can weaken the power of our words. He knows at some point words become useless. Action becomes the only solution. And the action can be as simple as just closely listening to the words the person is actually saying. By listening attentively, we can gain insights, build rapport, and make informed decisions. It also shows respect for others' perspectives and allows him to remain neutral in certain circumstances. Number 3. A true professional. One of the things we admire and have to respect about Tom is the way he carries himself, especially during that meeting with the music producer. He is calm, patient, and doesn't offend or berate the opposing side. He goes the extra mile, willing to do everything and anything he could do to get his clients the desired results. And there's a lot we can learn from that. Yes, we aren't consiglieris to a mob don, but the idea of being an elite-level professional is something worth pursuing. So it's not just his tailor-made suits. His professionalism extends beyond his appearance. It encompasses his conduct, integrity, and dedication to his role. Number 4. Eyes open, mouth shut, always on his toes. The mantra, eyes open, mouth shut, embodies Tom Hagen's vigilance and adaptability. This teaches us the importance of staying alert to changing circumstances, being prepared for unexpected challenges, and being flexible in our approach. It's a valuable lesson in navigating the unpredictable nature of life. Number 5. Respect. Tom knows his place and is not really ego-driven. He doesn't allow his position or status to belittle others, no matter who they are. He is a professional after all. Now this last one is key, and it's what gave Tom his edge. We'll be sharing the final lesson exclusively to the members of our newsletter. More info in the description. Once again, thank you for watching. Comment this below so we know who made it to the end. Once you've done that, you need to watch this video.